we're on to the bad. All right. So I don't have much, but I can't imagine this is going to be a short conversation. Let's just put it that way, because there's a lot to talk
No,
about.
I think there's. Fine. Don't let me finish that thought.
No, go ahead.
No, fuck you. Go.
Okay. There is a bit of a delay between us and a lag, so forgive us, everybody, if we're interjecting. Yeah, it's not going to be quick. And if you want to add to that, now's the chance. All right, moving on. Alpine was my first bad. I think we haven't really talked about them. We didn't talk about them last weekend. They were supposed to come out flying, and they're clearly not. And there's clearly some of the dysfunction that we saw last year. And they're clearly getting strategy wrong. There clearly is no pace there again. Maybe we'll see some improvement with the upgrades again, but I think it's finally about time to shine a light on them. Even Gasly is nowhere near the top 10 in terms of pure pace. I know he was in 11th before he got disqualified, but it wasn't like, he was more like clinging on to 11th. And so I think they don't necessarily have to raise the alarm bells yet, but they should start getting back to work if they thought the job was done. And I'll also just add this about Doohan. We're kind of just seeing everything that was said about him, that he's a decent qualifier, decent on a one-lap pace, and doesn't really have the race pace. I think, unfortunately, after what I've seen in these 2-ish races, 2.5 races, it's not looking good for him. So I hope he gets more of a chance. I hope he keeps improving, but it's, I don't know, not looking good to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, how do I put this? Gasly's doing reasonable. You know, we've had our comments about him, but I don't think either of us have ever said he doesn't deserve to be where he is.
Mm-hmm.
He's a point scorer. He's a Grand Prix winner, sure. But I think he's a mid-pack driver, and that's kind of where he is. Doohan, on the other hand, yeah, okay, he's got some talent, but he's not one of these generational talents. He's a rookie that's in there because, frankly, I think it's an overcompensation from Alpine after losing Piastri. You know, it's one of these, Alpine invested a ton of money in Piastri and potentially made him an outlier, right? Apparently it's, into the almost $10 million range that Alpine invested in Piastri and training and running in older cars and things like that, simulator time, et cetera, to lose that to McLaren and then see what he's been able to do, it's got to hurt. So I think that's why they've taken the guy that's been there for a while, has had some of that experience, and then pumped him up last year and did a lot of the same things, but didn't take into account the first part of the outlier scenario for Piastri. Right? I think Piastri was a better talent to begin with. Had the time in karting, had the time in the junior series, kind of went straight to a development program, and that's what made him an outlier. Whereas Doohan wasn't a phenomenal feeder series driver. He was okay, and then kind of sat on the sidelines for a bit, and only after losing Piastri did they say, oh shit, we should probably invest in him. Right? So it seems like a bit of an overcompensation to losing Piastri. I don't think he deserves to be dumped right away. He deserves a little bit of time to show one way or the other whether he's worth the effort or not. Unfortunately, I think we're at the whim of Flavio Briatore, who has very quickly gone about redoing what he had done when he ran the team previously. Right, when he ran it as Benetton and Renault, he had basically a carousel of drivers. And we're seeing that now, right? They signed Colapinto, they signed, who did they just recently sign?
Paul Aaron, Ritmo Miata.
Paul Aaron, yes, he's their reserve driver this year. They just signed another one. Anyway, they've signed. I think they've got 4 or 5 reserve drivers technically on the books,
Mm-hmm.
and this is exactly what Briatore did early on with Benetton and Renault, and you probably know it better than I do, Nick. You had guys like Fisichella, Schumacher. Who else would have been there?
So early on, it was Brundle, Schumacher in '92, and then Schumacher and Patrese '93, or vice versa. It might have been Patrese '92. Johnny, it was Jos Verstappen, Mika Salo, and JJ Letho in '94. It was Michael Schumacher and Herbert in '95. It was Alesi and Berger '96, '97. It was Fisichella '99 with 5 other drivers. I don't even remember their names. Fisichella came back in 2006 or 2005. Trulli was there for a bit. Yeah, the list is endless.
Yeah, and those are only the drivers that actually raced for the team.
Mm-hmm.
Behind the scenes, they had all the reserve drivers kind of in waiting, right? And they hinted at this in Drive to Survive in the latest season without going into too much detail, because why would they? It's Drive to Survive. But this is kind of what he does. He lines up drivers as kind of well, if you don't want it, you don't like it, you're going to complain too much, you're out, right? And that's a lot of what Drive to Survive focused on with his involvement in Alpine, is that effectively we learned Ocon lost his seat because he was too much of a whiny bitch. Right?
Yeah.
Without using those words, that's what Briatore said. You want to complain, you don't like it, fine, we'll find somebody else.
And that goes to it goes to the rumor that they were going to drop him entirely for Canada. That does speak to that. Yeah, if everybody remembers that part of last year correctly.
Yeah, and that's also why we saw in Abu Dhabi he wasn't racing.
Mm-hmm.
Right, by that point they had enough, and they said, "Fine, go away, go to Haas."
Duhan might be saved by the fact that he is Briatore is his manager, right? So if he just, I guess, keeps his mouth shut, yeah.
Yeah, but I think you're missing the point that, what we had just talked about having all these reserve drivers and everything else. Briatore was their manager at the same time as well.
That I didn't realize. I didn't realize he was all of there.
It's a tool that he uses to be able to say, okay, I manage you, but guess what? Doesn't matter where you go, I get paid. So if I don't like it, you're not going to race for me.
That's a good point. Very good point. Yeah, I think the writing's on the wall there, but I don't know.
I don't.
Go on.
No, I was just going to say that I hope Doohan doesn't get the boot. I would like to see him get a little bit of time to get up to speed with everything and show us whether or not he's worth it. My general consensus is, if you want to drop a driver, or if you've committed to a driver for a season, they should at least get half a season.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if we're into 24 races. It's a nice round number. Give them 12, and if they can't do it, switch them out. At least at that point, you still have the chance to recover some of the positions.
Well, and this is what I was going to talk about. This is what I was slowly getting to. Was we talked about last week the France Toss school of racing drivers. Like we're seeing now with Yuki, we're seeing improvement in year 3. If you don't have time to invest in someone for 3 years, if you don't think they're good enough for 3 seasons, don't sign them in the first place. This idea of constant
more than 3 years.
Yeah, but Tost believes it's 3 years you see their real potential.
Sure.
We'll just go with that. Yeah, with that random number. But like, if you don't have time to invest in them and give them a chance, if you can't even give them a season, why are you signing them? And we're gonna talk about that more, I think, in a bit too. You want to add anything else on Alpine?
No, I think that's good enough for that.
Okay, then let's go to Ferrari then. You want to start?
Do we have to?
There's not much to say there. It's been said by the FIA. It's been said by everybody else, but might as well just give our little blurbs on it.
Sure. So I think the obvious bad is, how the fuck did you get both cars disqualified?
Yeah.
Fred came out after the race and said, "Okay, yeah, we fucked up." All right. He took the blame for the team, and said Charles ran a phenomenal one-stop race, whatever. Same sort of excuse we got from Mercedes at Spa last year. We ran a strategy we didn't expect and we're underweight. Like, holy fuck, guys. You're running it that close to the limit that fractions of a millimeter of rubber are the difference between 800 kilos and 799. Like, I don't know exactly how much they were under, but if you're any more than, a couple of grams under, you're very close to that limit. And their performance in the race was not where it needed to be to have such a fine margin. Let's put it that way. Because their race pace in the Grand Prix was not great.
Yeah.
And that's the other part of this bad. How the fuck did Hamilton end up qualifying so poorly a day later?
Hours.
You had a winning car. Hours, yeah, sorry. You had a winning car. The team admitted to changing the setup. They had the fastest car on the grid. It won a sprint race, which, yes, is a shorter race, but it gives you a good indication of race pace. Better than any free practice running would have. And you said, oh, well, that's not good enough. Let's change the fucking setup. And ended up disqualified? Holy fuck.
Fifth and sixth. You're absolutely right. Like, if this is what you get, like, Russell won a race underweight. You barely mustered a fifth. And,
right.
And to your point, like, Hamilton's the fastest with no tire degradation. What did you need to change? Like,
and this is the hubris of Ferrari. Oh, that was great. Let's make it better. No, stop. You're going to fuck it up.
I know we've talked about this a million fucking times. And I hesitate to say it again, but like, I'll say it again. Like, we saw every bad part of Ferrari again this weekend. They don't understand the information that's being given to them. And it's Hamilton, Leclerc, it's Vasseur, it's everybody. It's like they roll the dice and think, okay, this is like, if it's a 6, we'll do this setup. If it's an 8, we'll do that setup. And that's probably what it was in between those hours. Like, because you're right, your guess is as good as mine. Like, what did you need to change? And how many times has Lewis Hamilton given you? I know I'm just saying Ferrari, but I'm saying in F1 in general. How many times has he given good advice or good feedback? Very rarely. Right? Like, very rarely. So, like, just go with what you have. Go with your gut at this point, and you're better off. Because this is not a thinking man's team. But anyway, sorry, I'm rambling now. Just get us back on track.
No, and that's fine, because I can understand Lewis coming back and saying, car felt great. He was, whatever it was, 8 seconds ahead. Car felt great. But you know what? I started noticing a bit of a balance shift at lap 12, right? So tires start to go off, the balance changes. Maybe if I had a little bit more of this, you make a slight setup adjustment. These guys may as well have changed the fucking car. It was a completely different car 2 hours later.
Yeah, 2-3 hours, yeah.
What the fuck are you doing? And then to get disqualified for plank wear. You didn't have enough running to judge the plank wear from the fucking sprint race? How the fuck do you do this?
That's grade 1 shit. Yeah. I know, it's mind-boggling, dude. It's Charles never had pace all weekend. So I wonder if they just went with 2 different setups to see which one worked. One worked, and instead of applying both of them, like you said, they just fucked it all up. Like, I don't even know how to say what I'm trying to say here. Like, I don't know how you get to this point. I don't know how you get, like, wasn't Vasseur hired to stop all this? Wasn't Vasseur...
Allegedly.
Yes, that's what I think I'm trying to say. Like, you're not supposed to have this fuckery. You're supposed to have steadiness. You're supposed to have a clear goal.
Yeah.
And we saw the exact opposite this weekend.
This is an exact scenario where the team principal, and you love to blame the team principal and praise the team principal for everything that happens, right? You and I had that discussion.
Starts at the top, but yeah, go on.
Well, no. You think there's only one person who works for the fucking team other than the drivers.
Sure, yeah.
This is a prime example of where the team principal should have stepped in and said, guys, we just won the sprint race by a margin. Don't touch the fucking car.
Yeah.
That's where the team principal comes in. All right. And if Lewis says, well, but I think this, no, shut up. You just won. We're going to put the same tires on, a new set. We're going to fill the tank, and you're going to go out there and fucking do it again.
Yeah.
They didn't need to make a hard decision. They didn't need to take a chance. They just needed to do what they did in the sprint.
Do you think that everybody else could have caught up? Maybe it's a case of that they didn't adjust as well as everybody else did? Or you legitimately think they just went so far backwards that we don't have to give
They
any...
admitted to making changes.
Okay, then there you go.
Ferrari said, we changed the setup of the car. Which to me is just a fucking amateur move. Like, yes, other people were changing the car because they legitimately learned something. At the end of that sprint race, Ferrari was still the fastest team. Even if everybody had learned everything they could and capitalized on every area they could, Ferrari was the only one that knew they were fast. Let everybody else fuck it up.
You once said to me, I'm talking like 25, 30 years ago now, I was making a toy model.
Not possible.
We
didn't know each other when we were 7.
25 years ago then. I'm trying to think. Yeah, my math apparently is off today. Something's off with me today. I was building a toy model, and I had overpainted it, and I had put way too much paint on there. I had way too many different colors. It just needed a simple style. And you came to me and you said, you know what, in this very adult manner, like you were like 11 or 12. And the way you said it to me has stuck with me to this day, because wow, that's such a good learning lesson that you knew that at a young age was amazing. And you said, less is more. You looked me in the eye and you said, less is more. Paint less, less paint next time. And it'll look just as good. It'll look even better. And that's what Ferrari needed to learn this weekend. Less is more sometimes.
Yeah, frankly, I probably said that to you because that's something my dad would have beaten into me for making the exact same mistake.
Well, thanks for not beating it into me then.
Oh, you tend to learn from trauma, right?
Yeah, who knows how much better I would be if you did. Anything else you want to add about Ferrari? Yeah. I've talked about this a million times. Leclerc, non-existent. That's the best you could do underweight. Hamilton, I don't know, not his fault, but yeah. But this is their issues.
I do have something else to add to the Leclerc topic. So the car was underweight, right? We know that. What happened in turn 1, lap 1?
For Leclerc, I don't remember.
He got up on the curb and kind of hopped into Lewis Hamilton.
That's right, the wing. That's right.
And lost an end fence on the wing. So Ferrari's explanation is he ran a one-stop race and the car weighed, and that led to more wear. Conveniently neglecting the fact that he's missing part of the fucking front wing. They didn't change his wing. They left him out there on that. That portion of the wing that he lost doesn't weigh a whole lot, but it weighs more than the fucking tire wear.
Mm-hmm.
If they had changed his wing, he would not have been disqualified.
Wow.
But he was fast, which raises the other question that a lot of people have been asking is, why was he still fast if that wing is allegedly so important?
What are your thoughts on that? Yes. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so I understand the basics of how that wing is designed. And those end fences are less important for aerodynamic performance of the car than they used to be. They used to be very critical because you used to be able to direct airflow away from the tire, which would then mitigate what the term that they use is squish, aerodynamic squish. So air basically gets around the tire and then gets squashed under and then squirted out the back of the tire. And that creates all sorts of fun aerodynamic principles. These wings, they're designed to limit the freedom of aerodynamicists to play with how the air rolls over the tire. What it's designed to do is to keep the air in a consistent location so that they don't create vortices that go outside of the car that then create dirty air like the old generation of car used to have, right? So those end fences were a particular spot of development for the FIA to say, if, let's keep them in a certain location with a certain design to minimize the dirty air around the car. So the aerodynamicists have less say in how those end fences affect the performance of the car, but it creates closer wheel-to-wheel racing because the air around the car is no longer as dirty. So the end fences actually don't have a huge impact on aerodynamics as far as downforce for the car itself. Now, we heard on the radio, I'm not sure your broadcast, but mine, the message to Leclerc was that they lost 20 points. So
yes.
Downforce is measured in points, unitless measure. 20 points is a lot. Based on his performance, he didn't lose 20 points.
No.
Right? So that is a prediction. Based on what they're seeing in the data, they can correlate, X amount of performance is X amount of points. But what that did create was a flexible front wing. And you could see it as he's cornering, as he's hitting high speeds. The front wings have a little bit of flex. They are allowed to move under the regulations. But effectively what that damage created was a movable aerodynamic element. Now, it was the left side of the car, and it is a right-hand circuit. So the left-hand side of the car is less worked. So it would have, the aerodynamic impact on the left-hand side of the car is less important at that point. But the wing is moving based on how much air is flowing over it, and it's potentially creating the ability to make it less draggy on the straight. And who knows what else, right? It could have changed the balance of the car where perhaps it wasn't set up properly, and breaking that piece off then changed the balance so that it actually behaved better. But it goes to two topics. One, if they had changed the wing, he wouldn't have fucking been disqualified.
Yes.
Another Ferrari fuck up. And two, the FIA needs to get pretty serious about how they police these things. Because in my opinion, that created a flexible aerodynamic element, a movable aerodynamic element, which is not allowed under the regulations. That should have been a meatball flag.
Yeah, and Kevin Magnussen, I know he's not in F1 anymore, could feel very angry. I remember in 2 instances in 2022 and even in 2023, he was forced to pit for something like that. They have been policing that. So yeah it was they were waiting for it, if I remember correctly. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, and we saw it where the end fence was damaged and hanging on, and it eventually broke free and flew off. And that is the exact same thing that Kevin Magnussen was shown that flag for, and was forced to come in and pit to avoid the fact that that end fence could have come off. So why was Ferrari allowed to get away with it?
Your guess is as good as mine. You're welcome to dive into the Ferrari conspiracy.
I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's a different race director. It's a different set of circumstances. And after it happened to Haas, they were a little bit more lenient about it, right? Which pissed Haas off, but everybody else was fine with it, obviously. So they have been more lenient with it, and I'm okay with that. I think it deserves a little bit of freedom, right? Unless, something is very clearly hanging off and runs a risk of hurting somebody. That's one thing. And I think the way that it happened with Leclerc was not necessarily dangerous, but let's have some consistency to it. And then let's take it another step further and say, okay, with that wing being damaged, is it still in the scope of the regulations? Right. And this applies to Yuki as well later in the race. And they pitted him for a new wing because he was losing time like mad. But, this same situation. Does this create a situation where the car is no longer compliant? And in Ferrari's case, in my opinion, it was no longer compliant in two ways. The car was underweight and it had movable aerodynamic components.
And from Ferrari's perspective, just to wrap it all up, if you pit Leclerc, it's 12 seconds, extra in the pit, but they were so far ahead, fifth and sixth, they would have had fifth and sixth, and they would have at least kept some of their points. Like Leclerc would have finished sixth, Hamilton would have finished fifth. And then, Hamilton gets disqualified after, but you don't know that at this point. So you might as well do it.
But also, you don't know what Leclerc's true pace was. That happened lap one. And everybody went, well, he's still fast. Sure, he was still fast, but we don't know how fast he could have been.
Exactly.
So when they pulled him in early and didn't change the front wing, sure, that pit stop would have been 14, 15 seconds instead of 3. But would he have been able to make that up having been pitted as early as he was and making it a one stop? Could he have been fourth or third?
Good point.
I think he may have been able to.
Counterpoint is that this is the only way Ferrari discovers aerodynamic advantages, by accident. So
you're assuming that they learn.
Nice. We're just dunking on Ferrari right now. I like it. Yeah. Anything else you want to add? Because we got a lot to talk about.
No, I think we've beaten that horse.
Yeah, and we're about to beat another. That's what I'm getting at. Oh, boy. I have Red Bull entirety. So both teams in my bad. Go for Racing Bulls again. You can start, and then I still have to gather my thoughts on what I saw with Red Bull.
Yeah, so let's do the less fun thing first. Their strategist, and I avoid saying this last week, like I said, I didn't want to incite violence. But at this point, I can't anymore. Their strategist needs to be hung up from a light post by their Achilles. Like, this is ridiculous. For fuck's sake. Like,
the only team the only team with a two-stop is all I'm going to say.
Yes. Stroll stayed out there, or Stroll pitted early onto a hard and stayed out there and ran and ran and ran, and everybody else got the fucking memo. Everybody else saw it. Holy shit, that hard tire is good. It has pace and it's lasting. And everybody else adapted, right? Not everybody else went with a one stop, right? Hamilton came in for 2 stops, but everybody had the same idea. The hard tire is the better tire, except for Racing Bulls. Racing Bulls went out there with the assumption that it was going to be a 2-stop, like everybody else. I'm assuming they would have seen what Stroll did, because if you're not watching what everybody else is doing, especially a midfield car where you're competing, you're not paying attention. Saw that and went, cool. We're going to do not that. We're going to do exactly what we started with because we're incapable of learning, and we're going to fuck with Yuki again. Absolute fucking nonsense. Yes, they pitted him relatively early. Yes, they put him on a hard. But then they brought him back in to put him on another fucking hard. He didn't need to be pitted again. Sure, his wing broke and he had to come in for another pit stop. That's when you put him on the other fucking tire. You're just sending him down the pack for no fucking reason.
He should have Albon's points. He should have Albon's points. Both races. Yes, yeah.
You want to make a fucking team swap? Don't swap the fucking driver. Swap the strategist.
Gabriel Bortoleto fastest lap in the first 10 laps when he switched to the hard tire early as well. Gabriel Bortoleto.
Yeah. Sure.
No, but I mean,
I
you
mean,
have to learn something from that if you're racing bulls. You have to see right there, like, if he's fast, we can do it. You know what I mean? Like, go on. Yeah.
yeah, and obviously the strategy was always to put him on the hard. But it's like they had a calculation that said it's only going to last X amount of laps, so it has to be a two-stop. And then no one went to look at Stroll and say, oh, fuck, he's already 50% over what we had calculated.
Yeah.
It absolute fucking nonsense. I hope they left that strategist in fucking China.
Listen, I hope he's not hung upside down, but he's probably in a Chinese working camp as we speak. So we can't win them all, Sean.
Strapped to the ground with bamboo growing underneath him.
Oh, Jesus Christ. To segue into what we saw happen this week, I think your other bad was Lawson, right? In the Red Bull group.
Well, no. Well, the other one of the other bads was still a Racing Bulls bad.
Oh, boy. There's more.
Oh, of course. It's the fucking front wing. How do you get a front wing that just collapses? I understand how it happens, but we've been racing with these cars for decades. We should understand what the load of a front wing is. Everybody's chasing margins, I get it. And the lighter you can make a part, the faster the car is going to go, right? But holy shit, you should understand what the lifetime of a front wing needs to be. And that was allegedly a new front wing for this race.
Oh, my God.
So it's got no runtime on it. I don't know. I'm assuming you don't understand what happened there, Nick.
No, I don't. I'm letting you explain.
I obviously haven't seen the failure, so I can't say 100% what it was, but my assumption is that it's a resonance failure where, the load over that wing is cyclic. So there's high load and low load, and it goes between the two as you gain speed, lose speed. As you run in dirty air, the car in front of you, the load over the wing changes and all that. When you see the onboard camera of the front wing, you can see as the car picks up speed, it kind of bends in, and then as they back off, it comes out. That's all load on the joint that holds all that together. As the wind and air go over that, you get a lot of vibration in that wing, and all of that is stress. And it all concentrates in the points that it attaches to the structure of the front wing. So every time that thing moves, whether it's vibrating at a certain frequency or it's flexing with the amount of load that's put on it, is stress. It takes away from the life of the part. They designed this part in a way that it couldn't support that load. Now, it could obviously be a quality issue where the part wasn't built properly, but it's still the same thing. If you're designing it to the point where a quality issue could affect it that badly, it's not designed to a safety factor that works. So Yuki was having a great race, despite the strategist's best attempt to fuck him over, had the possibility to fight back, got stuck behind Doohan for a couple of laps, looked like he was going to be able to make a move, and then all of a sudden the fucking wing disappears. And you could hear it in the team radio. They called him in for a pit stop to change a front wing, and he was completely mind-fucked. It's like, front wing damage from what? You don't damage a front wing just from running. He didn't go over some massive curb. He didn't hit anybody. The fucking wing's just gone. On the straight.
Jesus. I didn't see that part.
But this is also not the first time we've seen this happen. We saw this last year. Was it last year or the year before in Baku, where the fucking rear wing split in half? He opened the DRS and half of the fucking wing opened.
I think that was 2 years ago.
And then 2 years ago, sure. And then in Australia and in China, in FP1, they activate the DRS and the fucking DRS flap is fluttering. That shit shouldn't be happening either.
Oh my God.
So the car is good. It seems to have pace. It seems to be a contender, but it's definitely not reliable. So that's a little concerning. And it always seems that Yuki's the one that gets the brunt of these issues. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's just an observation.
Yeah, it would speak to the fact that most of the development goes through him. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe he's just that unlucky.
Could be.
Maybe he should go to Red Bull then.
No.
Yeah, let's.
I said it last week.
Yeah, no, he's better off. He's better off where he was.
I don't even. That's not even why I said it. At this point, I'm so fed up with Red Bull. I want them to just sit and stew in their shitty decision.
Yes, I wouldn't have said that before today. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have agreed with you on that before today. I said it in the last episode, but like it was more like an overreaction, like a tongue in cheek. Like, I hope you sit in it. I did want to see this team turn it around until today, when they finally pulled the trigger and replaced Lawson with Yuki after 2 races. And
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out how to say this without screaming. Because all week I was thinking the stupidest thing you could do after 4 months of, and I hate using this word because all Gen Z people use this word and literally way too much. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, anybody who's at least 10, 15 years younger than us uses the word literally and gaslighting way too much without understanding what the fuck it means. But in this sense, it makes a lot of sense that they gaslighted us for the last 4 months that Liam Lawson was the next big thing. Only to show us in 2 races that they never believed that even a little bit. Not even a little bit. When I'm agreeing with when I'm agreeing with P1's Matt and Tommy, it shows how dire the situation is, because Tommy was saying today, he said Liam Lawson got one weekend in Australia that was inflicted by rain and 1 free practice in China before a sprint to really get a handle on the car. That is that is nothing. That is nothing. Like you said, at least give him half a season. Sorry, go on.
No, you're on it. Don't get me wrong. I think Lawson was the wrong decision. We talked about that last year. And I'm going to go back to our conversation about Antonelli, right? When Toto basically gave him the stroke job in Monza of, oh, look at his performance. He's phenomenal. It's like, well, yeah, he went out there and he went fastest and he crashed the fucking car. But look at his time at the end of FP1. It was P20.
Yeah.
Don't, like you said, don't gaslight us into thinking he's fucking amazing. If you want him there, just tell us you want him there, which is what it was. There was nothing that indicated Liam was fucking amazing. He did the same as Danny Ricciardo.
If not worse.
Let's be optimistic and let's say he was the same. They put both drivers in the Red Bull, and from what I saw, not necessarily the team's official answer, but a lot of what was coming out was that, holy shit, everybody was impressed with Yuki, but we got Lawson. Do I think that Yuki's going to get in that car and do better? No, not necessarily. And that's kind of why I want Yuki to just say no, which he hasn't. And I understand why. Don't get me wrong. But fuck, like, Red Bull's just in the business of destroying drivers' careers at this point.
And I'm going to call this now, and I hope they're listening, and I hope our millions of followers dox Christian Horner. That's a joke, to both things. I think it's time he resigns. Because, like, I've never seen a team. I was just thinking back all week. I've never seen a team do so many own goals. It took regulation changes to stop Ferrari in the 2000s. It took regulation changes to stop Red Bull in the early 2010s. It took regulation changes to stop Mercedes. Red Bull should have this giant advantage. This giant fucking advantage. And they are screwing up every decision every step of the way. I've never seen a team like this.
Can I stop you there for a second?
Sure.
Normally, I would say probably not the right way to do that. But how do I put this? They lost Jonathan Wheatley, right? Which in my mind, he was the person to potentially take over from Horner. He's the only person that I know of on that team that could potentially do what Horner does. They've lost him. But if I was the board of directors of Red Bull, I would be on the phone to Jonathan Wheatley at Sauber saying, hey, listen, we've got this role. You're not going to have to answer to Helmut Marko. You're not going to even have to see the fucking guy because he's gone too. Get rid of Marko because who has the Red Bull Junior Driver Academy given us in the last 3 years?
Nobody. No. Yeah, Nick DeVries, Isaac Hadjar.
He wasn't. No.
Oh, that's right. You're right. It wasn't even him.
DeVries was not.
Wasn't even him.
Yeah. It's given us Liam Lawson, Isaac Hadjar. Yes, they have more than that. That's clear. They have people down into karting. But as far as talent, it's given us Liam Lawson, who everybody hyped up. But like you said, that's kind of a bit of gaslighting. And I don't dislike the guy. I think he has talent. He's shown talent in the junior series. But like I said earlier on this year and into last year, he doesn't have any experience in ground effects cars. All the hardware that he's driven that's been anywhere near comparable to F1 is an older generation. We didn't see any of his experience until he went to AlphaTauri VCarb. And that was partial seasons, and he, like you said, at best, the same as Danny Rick, who the team claims was not good enough. So why the fuck did he get the Red Bull seat? Isaac Hadjar fucked up in Australia, did okay in China, but based on what we've seen, may not be able to handle the pressure. And that's not because he cried in Australia. I don't care about that. It's because of what we saw in F2.
Yes.
Right? He was getting points. As soon as the pressure was on, he lost it.
Yeah.
That was F2. F1, tons more pressure.
Yeah, magnify it by 10. Exactly. And yeah, I was getting to Marko as well, and I'm glad you brought him up too. He's also a huge part of the problem. This is what I think the power struggle is. I called this power struggle to affect Racing Bulls before the season. I didn't think it would affect Red Bull this much. If it's affecting Red Bull this much, and you guys are fighting for championships allegedly, one, if not both, need to resign. I don't think, like you said last week, I don't think they're going to be able to get Marko to resign. He's just an old fart who just refuses to go away. Comes in, makes a comment about Sergio Perez being a lazy, I don't even want to say the word, but like lazy South American, you know?
Just don't say it.
I'm not, yeah. Lazy South American, even though he's Central American, even though he's actually North American. Anyway, and the South Americans that come into F1 are all champions. So shut the fuck up there too. They're both like, I bring up Marko because he rushed for an emergency meeting after China. You pushed Liam here. Liam and Danny and Sergio are gone because of you. Two experienced, capable drivers. Yes, Sergio wasn't working anymore. Yes, he probably needed to go. He needed to go halfway through 2024 because you lost faith in him and you didn't listen to him and you didn't listen to his advice on development. He didn't need to go at the end of the season. That was Horner fighting for him. That was the power struggle. And because Marko won, we've got Liam foisted in, but the second Marko looks like a fool, he pushes Liam out and doesn't even try and give him some time. If I'm defending Liam, you're the problem, Helmut. You're the problem, Christian. Sorry, I go on. You were about to make a point.
No, the thing I was going to say is that even in Helmut's prime, quote unquote prime, it wasn't him, right? We talked about this recently. Vettel, Verstappen, now Yuki. Yes, they're part of the Young Bull. Oh, fuck me. They're part of the Red Bull Young Driver Academy. So that is Marko's jurisdiction. But they only got to where they are because of Franz Toast.
Yep.
So Marko can identify talent, sure, but without having Franz there to actually make them worthwhile, which is what the fucking junior team was meant for, put these people under Toast in a team that gets them experience so they can be champions in the number one team. Mind you, I don't think they understood what an impact Toast was until he was no longer there.
That's an excellent point. Yes, 100%.
Now they don't have it. And this is what I was talking about a couple weeks ago about the ship of Theseus. one by one, all these boards get replaced, and it's no longer the team it was. And everybody's going, oh, but everything's the same. Well, no, it isn't. You've broken the structure. You've changed the makeup of this team. It's no longer what it used to be. It's no longer a dual championship winning team. And part of that is the last champion you put in place is such a fucking android that you cannot make a teammate for him. And we see this, right?
Yeah.
Sainz. He didn't want to put him with Verstappen. He's off being a race winner with other teams. Gasly wasn't good enough. Okay, won a race with another team.
Also
has
was
decent performances with a mid-pack team.
Also was treated harshly
Right.
by said Marco. Yeah, go on.
Yes. Also, Gasly was a bit of an arrogant prick. Same with Liam.
Ditto. Yeah.
Kind of, dug his own grave there.
Yes.
Albon actually did good. By standard compared to Gasly, Albon did really well as a teammate to Verstappen. But they didn't give him time.
No.
And now where is he? He's building Williams back to a front-running team. Red Bull really needs to have a long, hard think about what they're doing moving forward.
Yes.
The answer obviously is not to get rid of Verstappen. They need to keep Verstappen there. They need to do something about that car. And they need to find a way to make that car work for two very different drivers. Because there is nobody else on the grid. Unless you bring back peak Michael Schumacher, you're not going to get two drivers on the grid that can do what Verstappen does.
Yeah, if Verstappen leaves, they're going back to 2005 capability where they finish 7th and they're happy about it. I don't know how you do that. We don't have time to delve into how they would potentially get a second car properly without it affecting Verstappen. At this point, they just have to hope that Yuki can step up and develop his car in his orbit just good enough to get points. But I just want to pause. Yeah, go on. Before I pause at the question, go on.
No, and I think this is where they think Yuki may help, because in China, they ran technically two different cars. They ran two different sets of aero packages. And I believe they did the same in Australia. So they ran, let's call it the latest packages on Verstappen's cars. And usually when the team brings an upgrade, it's usually considered an upgrade across the board, right? But the car is clearly geared to Verstappen. So any upgrade they bring is going to be geared in the same way that the development is taken. And in Australia, I believe they showed up with the Bahrain package on Lawson's car. And everybody interpreted that as, oh, they built one set of upgrades for Verstappen. Well, no. I would suggest that they built an upgrade for Verstappen to balance out some of the deficiencies they found in Bahrain, but they kept the car the same as Bahrain to help Lawson potentially get more experience on a car that he already understood or had experience on, at least. So don't change the car for Lawson because he's still getting used to it. Same thing in China. Change a little bit, see if it helps. Bring a track-specific update, see if it helps. It didn't help. So now this is testing plus Australia plus China, and it's not helping. He's still pinned to the back. And this is where I think bringing Yuki in is going to show them, hey, was it Lawson, or is the car really that one-sided? And don't get me wrong, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, maybe the car really is bad and Max is just a phenomenal driver. No, I think the car is really good. I think it's potentially taken a step back from last year, but a good car is hard to drive.
That's a good point.
A fast car is very hard to drive. Even if you have fast cars, like take a road car, for example, right? Like a high-end sports car can be very fast in mediocre hands, right? I've gone around a track in a Mercedes AMG GTR. It's a very fast car. It's also a very easy car to drive very fast. But I guarantee you put that car in the hands of somebody who's much more capable than I am, and they're going to eclipse my time several times over.
Hmm.
Right? If you were to take, what's the example? Um, well, this is actually a prime example for supercars in general, Lamborghinis. Lamborghinis are generally considered, let's say, pre-Volkswagen buyout, to be very dangerous cars. TVRs are another one. Very dangerous cars to drive because they snap, they tend to bite and um, punish very minor mistakes. That's not because they're bad cars. That's because they're cars that are extremely fast and there's nothing there to aid an unexperienced driver. If you know how to drive them, they will be supremely fast. If you don't know how to drive them, they're dangerous. And that's what I think the Red Bull is.
That's a very good point. Yeah, that's a very, like, the Red Bull doesn't have a problem with a lack of speed. They probably have too much speed that they just haven't figured out how to harness. And both drivers.
No, it's not even that. It's that the car is very good, but it takes a certain level of skill to know where the limit is.
Okay.
Right? So someone like Verstappen, who is very acutely in tune with how that car performs, knows exactly how to drive it, right? And this is something that race car drivers, like a touring car driver, for example, going to F1 tends to struggle with, especially if it's like a car that's not very aerodynamically influenced, right? Like a DTM car, for example. A DTM driver going into an F1 car is going to be drastically slower because that sense of the faster you go, the more grip you have around the corner is so much different in F1, right? Cornering at the speeds, in an F1 car, if you corner at the speeds you would in a DTM car, you're not going to make the corner. You have to be going past a certain speed to build up the downforce to make those corners. And that's where I think the Red Bull has this ability to, there's a very narrow operating window that Verstappen knows how to be in. And on either side of that is a crash.
Mm.
So unless you can operate in that very narrow window that Verstappen likes, you're not going to do it. You're either losing far too much time to get yourself into a safe operating window, or you're in the wall.
And let's hope Yuki knows that window, because apparently experience wasn't necessarily the X factor, because otherwise Perez would have figured it out. They would have thought the same of Danny, but I guess there was a lot more problems there and then just a lack of speed. Maybe just he didn't have the mental wherewithal, as we saw at the end of Drive to Survive. He was probably mentally checking out of Formula One. That's why they didn't put him in there. And let's hope Yuki gets it right, because this is my last question of the night, and I think we got to have a hard stop. What happens if Yuki doesn't? It looks like they have no backup plan because they started Lawson first, which goes to the own goals I was talking about. Had they have just kept Lawson at Racing Bulls to start and let Yuki try and figure this out, a man with experience, the man trained by Toast like Verstappen, I think they would be in a much better position. Everybody said it, and we all knew it. We said it before the season. But what happens now if he can't figure it out? How bad does it get for Red Bull?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just go back to the regulation side of it. Each team is only allowed to field 4 drivers per year.
Oh, fuck.
And we're on 3 for Red Bull. So they don't have a whole lot of choices. Right? I've heard some murmurs that Liam may actually be out.
Yeah.
So they're putting Yuki in, they're moving Liam back, and we'll see how that goes. But there's some murmurs in the background about maybe Liam disappears and they bring in Colapinto next to Isaac on loan from Williams.
Which they didn't want after his crashes last year.
Right.
It would be very silly, I think, if they did that now.
I agree. But then this creates an interesting scenario, because at that point, Racing Bulls will have had 4 drivers. So they're done. So if they decide to if Yuki can't do it and they decide to switch him, who do they switch him with, and what happens there? Yuki can go back to Racing Bulls, but does that mean they give Colapinto a seat at Red Bull? What are their backups? Bring Danny back?
There's a man on a 2-year contract, allegedly.
Who's that?
Sergio Perez. He doesn't seem like he was the problem.
Well, his contract has been broken. He no longer has that contract.
Yeah, if that's official, yeah, I wasn't sure what the deal was with that. I thought they just sort of dropped him, but he was sort of paid out or kept, I guess, maybe given some money or just kept under contract as like an ambassador or something.
Nope.
He's done.
His contract was to race, and they broke that contract, and they paid him out to get him out of that seat. So he no longer has a contract with Red Bull. He's gone.
Danny Ricciardo?
I mean, he can still come back. They can bring him back, but now they have to be careful because they're at 3 drivers in that team. The next driver is the last driver they can bring in.
It's not going to be Danny, I don't think.
I don't think Danny wants to. I think he's done. He said it himself.
Yeah. Oh, boy. So many logical ways for Red Bull to approach this last year. Like we said, you and I said, drop Sergio for a couple races, give him a break. You have him under contract. Try out Danny. Try out Yuki. No.
Mm-hmm.
No, they did the worst possible situation.
Yeah. And
go.
I want to go here just because you and I talked about it. And it pisses me off that this announcement came before we were able to record this episode. Because my best case scenario that I talked about with you earlier in the week was we're coming up to Japan, right? When Honda announced that they were leaving in 21 or whatever it was, Red Bull put together that awesome white Japanese livery that we saw in Turkey because we couldn't go to Japan as a goodbye present for Honda. So they were meant to race that in Japan, but we couldn't go there. Why not, for shits and giggles, put Yuki in the car in Japan this year with that same livery and say, hey, as a nice going away present to Honda, we're going to try Yuki out. And we're going to do it in a white Honda livery as a celebration of our partnership with them. It's a one race thing. Yuki gets to sit in the car. He gets to race the entire weekend. Liam will go to Racing Bulls. And then come Bahrain, Liam's back in the car. Yuki's back there. Everything's back to normal. And that gives them the benefit of the doubt, right? It lets them say, hey, we're doing this for a reason. And then if they see something and Yuki can perform and Liam does okay in the Racing Bulls, they go, oh, look at that. An unintended positive came out of this goodwill gesture to Honda. Now we're going to make the switch. That case, I think everybody comes out on top. And that, frankly, to me, is a marketing win for Red Bull. Doesn't have the potential to blow up Yuki's career. Doesn't cast a negative light on Lawson, per se. And it lets everybody come out looking better than they currently do. But no, that's not what we got, is it, Nick?
We've gotten yet another own goal in a series of own goals. And that's a very smart way to put it. Yeah, that was a very smart way to put it. Yeah, you could have masked all of this under a gesture for the Japanese Grand Prix instead of destroying Liam Lawson and before our very eyes, and potentially destroying Yuki too. But
yeah, exactly. This is the James Vowles Colapinto discussion we had last year, right? Red Bull has effectively destroyed 2 drivers' careers with this one move. Because if the car really is the way it is and Yuki can't drive it, Yuki doesn't come out of this clean.
Nope.
I guarantee you the media turns on him and makes him another Sergio Perez, Liam Lawson.
Yep. This is a no-win situation, whereas if they started Yuki, it was a win-win. We talked about it preseason. Yuki was disposable this year. So if you started him this season and it didn't work, then you could have promoted Liam and waited for him to figure it out. Instead, you've made Yuki Tsunoda a lose-lose situation from a win-win. But yeah, we gotta do a hard stop, if that's okay.
Yep.
I gotta get moving. Thank you. A lot of great analysis today. I'm sorry we got to cut it short, but yeah, I could go on about this for hours, but I think we should just leave it there.
I think we've discussed it. So looking forward to Japan. We'll see what comes out of it. Should be fun.
I think Red Bull needs a big win here, but I don't know if they're going to get it. We'll see.
Oh, they won't.
We will see. All right, everybody. F1 Philosophy at YouTube and Spotify. Like and subscribe, please. All right, Sean, have a great night.
Thanks, Nick. You too. Bye, everyone.